Working with trucks, early starts are usually part of the deal, and especially so if you're moving heavy equipment. Owen Campbell and Richard Tooner drive for Queenstown-based Forks Enterprises and are well used to saddling up before dawn. Today, they're dragging a pair of cat excavators to the far side of Lake Wakatipu. A trip that only takes 15 minutes or so by boat under normal circumstances, but it'll be a 400-kilometre haul for these T604 Kenworths through some of Southland's finest backcountry before they get back into the yard. Barging the diggers across the lake isn't an option, but Owen and Richard don't mind. They're always up for a trip into this region. It's a great ride and will take them through some classic New Zealand backcountry. Basically, the boys will head south, then west and then north, which brings them pretty much south of where they started on the far side of the lake, where they'll drop the diggers and then retrace their steps. The views are big in this valley, and we've heard of it likened to Montana's famous Big Sky Country. Once they pass the Mavora Lakes turnoff, they're getting into country that's seldom visited, unless you're chasing trout, doing a spot of hunting, or you've got some trucking to do like these boys. It's a route that's usually only plied by the odd livestock unit, bulk rigs and spreaders, contractors, or just the plain curious. It used to be a real adventure getting in here, and the track has been marginal for most of its existence. It's a straightforward run, apart from one big hill and a couple of bridges that means Richard has to drop his digger a couple of times due to the weight and width restrictions. These Kenworths have 600 Cat C16 horsepower under the hood, and they'll hardly raise a sweat on this shift. When it comes to these troublesome bridges, the boys act as a team, and Owen parks up and goes back to help Richard unchain and then chain up again once the digger has crossed the stream and clattered its way up the hill. This sort of country isn't a place to take shortcuts, and Richard and Owen aren't the type of operator that are going to bend the rules just to save a bit of bother. They'll load and unload as many times as necessary, and on a day like this, nobody minds getting out of the cab anyway. Once again, this bridge isn't up to the task of handling Richard's 3 rows of 8 trailer and more than 30-ton load, and the digger goes off to cross the river while Richard inches across this bridge, which is even tighter than the last one. It requires precision driving. The outer wheels of this trailer will be riding on both bridge lips, and the trailer is too low to drive across the river. The bridge also has dangerously steep approaches, as these northern Southland transport holding rigs show us on a trip to Mount Nicholas Station back in the early 90s. That trip had a bit of snow and rain hanging around, and the previous trip in for Forks was similar. The weather is a lottery in the backcountry and can change the whole nature of the trip. Both Owen and Richard have a great appreciation of the country they work in, and particularly like this trip, which is a nice break from driving around Queenstown, where they spend a lot of time under semi-bathtubs working on construction sites.
Oh, it's just a good day, good day's trip out of Queenstown for a day. Got to be good, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's a great part of the world. It's the sort of country not everyone gets to, and we're probably quite privileged to be able to get into areas like that. The scenery in there is, you just don't see scenery like that in other parts of the country.
The biggest test on this trip is the Von Hill, which drops around 300 metres from this broad valley to a lower, narrower valley carved out by the Von River, which winds its way down towards Lake Wakatipu. It's not to be taken lightly. This is a steep descent, full of blind corners and big drop-offs. The penalty for error is severe on this particular bit of the track. And while the road is in good condition today, when there's snow around or the spring thaw is underway, this bit of road can be a challenge not to be underestimated. The sound of those big cats holding back down that incline is as beautiful to some of us as the scenery, and would gladden the heart of any trucker. The closer the T604s get to Wakatipu, signs of civilization start reappearing, such as green pasture, and the wilderness eventually gives way to farming territory. The last bridge stops Richard, as his trailer is too wide to make it across. So the dig is unloaded again, and it's walked to the site, which is just a few kilometres up the road.
The first bridge that we come to, the Ariti Bridge, was alright, but the second one had an 80% restriction on it, which means that you can only be 80% of your full axle weight. And because we had that 30-tonne digger on there, that put us over that threshold. So we had to take that off there and reload it on the other side. And then the third bridge was too narrow for the trailer, because the trailer needs to be out a bit wider to carry the wider digger.
There are just a handful of big stations on this side of the lake, and these diggers are destined to work on an elite subdivision development on Walter Peak Station. The steamer Earnslaw used to be the lifeline of these stations before the road. But even though she's just a tourist novelty these days, she's still a proud old girl whose work record is second to none, after around a century of plying these waters. These boys are pretty good at dropping and loading heavy gear, and it's not long before the Kenworths are headed out again. And it's an even easier trip coming back out, with no backload and 600 horsepower under the pedal. Apart from the road, there aren't many signs of the hand of man in this region, apart from a few trees and the remnants of an old homestead. It was a tough life here back in the late 1800s, and for much of the early 1900s, before the road became established. It's a straightforward run, nothing very hard about it, but driving trucks for a living can put a big smile on the dial when this sort of country is your workplace.